Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about how to start thinking about your 2L job search when you're still a 1L. Your Law School Toolbox host today is Alison Monahan, and typically I'm here with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. We're the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about how to start thinking about your 2L job search as a 1L and really whether you even need to do so. So welcome, Sadie.
Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. And this episode is actually based on a question we got from a listener who is a second semester 1L, and they were wondering what they should be doing right now to set themselves up for a summer job as a 2L. Well, the first answer that we gave is simple, right?
Yes. The first answer is maybe don't focus on it right at this moment in the year. And I would really focus on your grades, making sure that you have the strongest transcript when you get done with the semester that you can, because that really is going to be the most important thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes in the second semester, people maybe slack off a little bit. Maybe they're frustrated with their grades the first semester, so they don't try as hard. But I think anything you can do to get your grades as high as they can possibly be this second semester 1L year, that's going to set you up for long-term success and can make a real difference. So, not to say that you can just ignore everything else completely, but I think focusing on your grades is actually the best thing you can do to set yourself up for a later job, right?
Absolutely. And I think something to remember here is that employers really look at like the trends. So if you didn't do as well first semester, but you do a lot better second semester, that is going to be something that you can explain in your story, which we've talked about before. So I think that's important. I think, if the opposite is true, I think that can reflect kind of worse on you if you did better. Yeah, if you did better first semester and then it does look like you sort of slipped up second semester, that's going to kind of say there's a downward trend.
Right. I admit I had a downward trend.
I bet it wasn't that bad.
It wasn't that bad. But I was also like clinically depressed. So, given the situation, I figured probably some slippage was going to happen.
Yeah. Which it did. And that, there's a reason for that. But if you're just slacking off, for whatever reason, I think that is not going to look good.
Yeah, I didn't do terribly. It just wasn't quite as good. To be fair, I did very well first semester, which is what caused me to become clinically depressed about the stress. So anyway, that's a different podcast. Probably we've already recorded that one sometime or at least written about it. All right, so basically I think the key is here, focus on your academics, but I do think that there are things people should or could at least be doing or thinking about, right?
Absolutely. And I think, also if you kind of have the academics covered and you feel like, you're able to balance things and you're handling things pretty well, I think it's fine to add in a little bit more in terms of your job search.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to hurt you to, at a minimum, I think this is a time to kind of start thinking about what you'd like to do, maybe start making a plan, getting your application documents together, things like, what is the basic time frame for applying for the type of jobs you're interested in? That is something you probably want to be able to answer, right?
Definitely. And you probably want to calendar it and give yourself deadlines, I think is always a good idea. Sort of reminders, okay, I want to have this done by this time, and give yourself plenty of room. I don't think you want to be in a situation where the application's due and you don't have your final resume done and it's the night before and you're up late. That's when mistakes are going to happen. So give yourself plenty of breathing room.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So these are things that you could go and discuss with your career services office even now. These are the type of jobs I'm considering, and we'll talk, a little bit more detail later about some different things. But, if you're considering government work or pro bono work or big law work or whatever, they're at least going to be able to tell you, okay, well, this is when those jobs typically start taking applications, because often this is really formalized. If you're trying to get a big law summer position, you're probably going to try to get that through on-campus interviewing, which starts at a certain time.
Yeah.
And the same thing with government stuff. Like, these tend to be pretty structured in terms of, what's the time frame in which they're accepting applications. Public interest stuff could be more fluid, but maybe not. You need to know the answer to these things.
I think being organized here is key. Because it's also going to make you stand out, because a lot of people aren't. So you be the one who is.
Yeah, exactly. If you're the one who actually applies, like the first day they open the application, that's going to look good for you. I think you also need to know, like, what is the basic process for applying for the type of jobs you're considering. I mean, you might just think like, oh, you send out applications, right? But no, OCI is different from government jobs, which is different from public interest jobs, which is different from small firms. You need to kind of understand how this happens.
Absolutely. And you should be well-versed in whatever area you're looking at. And maybe you're applying in multiple areas. So you want to keep things straight, because maybe you have different resumes for each one.
Exactly. You may have a different process. You might be applying for government jobs, but also for public interest jobs. Yeah. And you might want to emphasize different things, for different aspects of that. I mean, if you're applying for like the DA's office, you're probably going to emphasize something different than if you're applying for the Bronx Defenders.
Right.
Like, those are kind of different things. You don't
want to mix it up. Yeah. Or have a different story. You want to make sure that you are super clear. And I think, we've talked about lots of ways to keep yourself organized before. And this is a situation where I think with your job search, you need to.
Yeah. And also, if you're applying in different locations, I think that's also worth time framing, because say that you are in law school in one place, but you are from a different place and you think you want to return there and you're going to be working there this summer. Well, that might be a great time to do some, groundwork in a way that you can't do if you're away at school. So, I don't think you need to get totally stressed over all of this, but I think now is a good time to be thinking through these options.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, doing it now is what's going to alleviate the stress later, because you're going to have plenty of breathing room.
Yeah, I mean, now it's like so far off in the future, you're just kind of brainstorming. But when it gets to be, after school started and you're running around like a crazy person as a 2L, that's going to be a lot more stressful. Another thing that I think people should be aware of generally are your school's funding deadlines. So if your school provides, say, public interest funding, sometimes that's automatic and you just have to apply for it, but sometimes it's not, and it's a competitive process. So you're going to need to be sure you have everything ready to go for that. Again, the time frame, the process, because frankly, you kind of want to get paid.
Yeah, and it's on you. You don't have anyone else to blame if you miss a deadline or you don't do it right. Because I find a lot of people, oh, well, this wasn't clear or all these kind of things. It doesn't matter. Like, it's going to be your problem.
Yeah, exactly. You're the one who wants the job. You're the one who wants the funding. So you're the one who needs to figure out how to make it happen. And that's not to say there aren't people who can help you. I think this is a great time also to start building that relationship with your career services office.
Yes.
Like, these are the people who can help you understand all of these timeframes and deadlines. Like, this is what they do. They can help you with your application documents, your resume, your cover letter. And as we've talked about before, you kind of want to be friends with these people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. This is the time to bake some cookies and show up and make sure that they remember you as the person. I think I've talked about this before, but I think baking is an excellent way to make friends. And I think that they have so many students, and like, yes, it's their job to help everybody, but why not be somebody they remember in a positive way because you were, extra nice or did something nice or, someone who has a good attitude.
Right, and this is probably kind of a downtime for them as well, because they're not really ramping up for, the big push for OCI and things like that right now. So they're probably likely to have more availability, be less stressed out. So again, if you're trying to avoid everyone's stress, this is a great time to go and make friends and chat up your career services officers, because they're also less stressed than they will be in August.
Definitely. And they might have ideas that you haven't even thought of, or they're in touch with all these employers. They have relationships. So I think you have to use it as an opportunity to learn from them.
Right. And I think it's fine at this point, particularly to, this kind of early stage, to go in and say, well, I'm not entirely certain what I want to do. I'm considering these couple of different options. Can you kind of give me an idea about how that might work? What do you think my odds are? How would the process work? That kind of thing, in a way that, again, like in September or October, they're going to kind of expect you to have figured this out already.
Yeah, and especially I think if you have something like that you need to explain or that you're concerned about, that's something I would think about way ahead of time. Like, how is this going to come across, or whatever it is, or like we talked about, you're going to apply in a different city and you didn't get a 1L job there, so you're trying to figure out like how you can position yourself.
Yeah, so I think this is a great time to go and like pick their brains, make a couple of appointments, talk about stuff, maybe bring back your resume and cover letter, get some more feedback on it, that kind of thing, because they are going to have availability. Let's talk specifically, before we dive into a couple of other things, let's just talk specifically about some things that might be coming up that people probably do want to give some thought to at this point. So first up, Sadie, tell us about OCI. What is that?
So it's on-campus interviewing, and we do have some episodes specifically on this topic if you'd like to hear more in detail. But essentially, it's an organized recruiting process for mainly big to medium firms, and there are some other I think there are government jobs that do participate in it sometimes. It's mainly a big firm thing at most schools, though. It's usually at a hotel or sometime at a school, and it sort of, can be kind of a grueling process where you do lots of interviews. But if that's the kind of job you're looking for, it really is your best chance to get that 2L summer job with them, because that's how most people in the sort of big to medium firm market, that's how they're hiring. And it usually takes place somewhere around the end of July to the beginning of August. It used to be much later, but it's moved up quite a bit. So it's usually taking place right when you're finishing your 1L job. Some people are still in their 1L job. So it's very tight to be ready for it then, and maybe you're busy in the summer. So that's why I would say you sort of want to think about it ahead of time. You're also going to be bidding for firms and picking which firms you want to apply for. And I think there's different deadlines everywhere for that, but you want to make sure you know what the deadlines are and you've really done your research about your strategy for picking those firms.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is definitely an area where it has moved forward a lot compared to what it used to be. And so you do definitely want to be ready for that. I mean, you don't need to necessarily be stressing out in April about what firms you're going to bid on, but you do want to know that, okay, by the middle of June, I need to have this figured out. And again, have a plan for how you're going to do that.
And kind of know what you're going to do if you don't get the firms you want. There's still options to write in or get added into schedule. So make sure you're really ranking what's important to you, because I do think that you have more control in this situation than a lot of students realize.
Yeah, I think just the more you can understand about that process, and as you mentioned, we have a number of podcasts you can go and listen to about bidding and all these different things. But the more you understand the process, the more you can be strategic about it. And the more you can solve problems about, bidding in different areas or that kind of thing. But you definitely don't want to kind of just go into this blindly and pick your firms the night before and kind of hope for the best, because, it's a tough economy still. So that's unlikely to really pay off for most people.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think the other thing people definitely want to be thinking about right now is if you don't have a 1L job. And again, we just did a podcast on this, so go listen to it. But after grades, this is really one of the most important aspects of getting that 2L job. So, you need to do this. You got to find a job for your 1L summer.
Yes. And I think like we've talked about before, if you don't have one yet, you're probably not in super panic mode, but there may be a point where you are in panic mode and you need to have a job of some sort. And it may not be what you wanted, and it may not be where you started out with this, but you're going to have to find something and make the best of it, because that's the thing you're going to be talking about in these interviews.
Right. And also it's going to give you that opportunity to actually work in a lawyering context. So you're actually going to learn something, and it's going to give you something to talk about. So, if you don't have that, it's just kind of this glaring gap on your resume and things are not going to go well. So, there may be career fairs, that kind of thing that you should be aware of. But definitely, if you do not have a summer job yet as a 1L, this is something you do actually really need to focus on.
Yes, that should be your priority over thinking about the 2L summer for sure.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be worrying about OCI if you haven't found anything to do as a 1L.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
good point.
I think also this is a really great time to look for real networking opportunities that might actually pay off and help you get a 2L job. And so by this, I don't mean, I'll just go to some random event and talk to 2 people. I mean like real stuff. So for example, doing a pro bono project in an area that you're interested in. That's a way that you can get tons of connections. You can get really good experience. You can meet people. It's a great thing to put on your resume. It's a great thing to talk about. Presumably you're going to get something out of it personally. You're going to learn something. And the second semester, when hopefully you're a little more settled into classes, you're not feeling quite so much pressure. I mean, as we said, you need to keep your grades up, but you probably do, frankly, have more free time. I think that can be a great place to really dig in. And, even if you're just spending, say, 5 hours a week on this, it can really pay dividends.
Absolutely. And I think that there are lots of ways to get involved, either on campus or, in the city that you're in. So bar associations. I know that a lot of employers work with affinity groups or specific, groups in a certain area, if you're interested in IP or whatever specifically. So they kind of do things to make relationships with people, in specific areas. So if I think that's a great way to do it. And just kind of make those relationships, make those connections, especially if it is about something substantive that you want to do. I think that's great. And, it's about sort of putting yourself out there, being prepared. And I think as a 1L, if you sort of prepare and, try to be as polished as you can, you are going to stand out because a lot of people don't. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity if you want to be proactive.
I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of 1Ls kind of overlook these more like off-campus activities. And if you do show up to them and you're professional and you have, your elevator pitch planned and that kind of thing, you never know who you're going to meet. I've heard tons of stories of people getting connections or jobs through some random event that they went to at some affinity group or, at the Inns of Court or whatever it is. So, and oftentimes they'll let you show up for free or for very, very reduced price. So I think this is an overlooked area of networking. Another thing I like is, say, like a volunteer group that's doing a project of some type, not necessarily a pro bono project, but say more along the lines of going to a food bank or something like that and volunteering for a few hours as members of the local bar association. That kind of thing, fantastic. People are there. You've got nothing to do except sort beans and rice. Like they're chatting. They're going to ask you about yourself. It's a very good way to make I feel like it's just a more solid type of connection than you can make just going to some mixers.
Definitely. I think that, doing something and doing something together with a group, I just think it's kind of, like you said, sort of a better way to really connect with people and they're going to remember you. And I also think a lot of times not a lot of people do it. I was surprised at how many things we would host and not that many people would show up. And I felt like it was a great opportunity.
Yeah, talk some more about that because I know like at Columbia, they had these sort of evening receptions at different firms and groups through. I think you've mentioned maybe mock interviews. What kind of stuff might be showing up?
Yeah, so I think mock interviews is a top thing. And I know at any place I've worked, we would always send attorneys to do it. And sometimes the schedules wouldn't even be full. We would either send them on campus or sometimes invite them, to our office. We would also do things, where we would have sort of a tour of the office and like a sit down with, let's say the partner in charge of the office, even the chairman of the firm. That is such a good opportunity. And, to show up and be prepared and be interested and chat with people in that kind of environment is great. And also gives you a chance to really see what it's like. A lot of people have never even been to a law firm before in that situation. So I think those are great. We would sometimes send speakers on campus to do a talk about a specific subject that the law school was interested in, again, usually in a specific area. And I think even if it's maybe not your top area, I think it's great to go to those. You might learn something. You definitely can chat with people afterwards. So there's some examples.
Yeah, and I think this is a great place to bring your professors in too, because you can show up to office hours as a current student or a former student of theirs, say a professor you liked last semester. I'm sure they would love it if you dropped by in office hours just to chat for a few minutes. And they may have advice for you. They may be looking for an RA or something along those lines. But, you can also just talk to them generally about, hey, I'm interested in doing this type of work. Like, how do you think I might do that? They may not have any useful information, but they might. You don't know.
Yeah, I think that you need to be proactive here and, put yourself out there. And some things are going to lead to some things won't. But I don't think any of this is sort of a waste of time.
No, I think casting a wide net here, but really trying to be strategic about it, not just going to every possible event, but really thinking through, okay, I'm going to go to these 2 things this week, and I'm really going to try to talk to 5 people or whatever it is, kind of set yourself some mini goals, that kind of thing.
I think that's really important. I will say that you can tell if a student's just there for the free food, and you sort of remember people. And I understand that, some students are going to do that, but that just feels icky to me. So go and, act interested and really chat with people, and I don't think that just going for the free food and like leaving or just chatting with your friends is a great idea.
Yeah, I think, there has to be a balance. And if you say you're someone who's very introverted, you really don't feel comfortable, putting yourself out there, I think that is one of those places where doing more of a group activity, like the volunteer or something like that, can really be helpful, because you don't actually really have to talk that much. People are probably going to approach you just, hey, can I share your table to bag these beans? Yeah. It just gives you an easier way to break in for a lot of people than standing there with, your glass of white wine, kind of thinking, is anyone going to talk to me? Like, is this a total waste of time?
I think this is sort of practice round too, especially if these things are sort of early, because you're going to have to do a lot more of this.
True.
So you might as well do it when the stakes are, sort of lower at this point.
No, that's a great point. I think if you are someone who's really either hasn't been in this scenario before or is just temperamentally kind of uncomfortable with this type of networking, these are great opportunities to practice and to really do structured practice, to set yourself that goal of, okay, today my goal at this event is to approach at least 2 people and talk to them. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to get their card and they're going to offer me a job. It's really just like you're standing by, you see people standing by the food table alone, and you go up and ask them, hey, that looks good. Have you tried that yet? Like, it doesn't actually have to be any harder than that.
No, or I know we would talk a lot, like, if it's, let's say the event's like on a Monday, Tuesday, how was your weekend? Like, come up with some things that, are easy conversation starters. And I don't think it's silly to sort of write them down and have them in your head ahead of time, especially if you're someone who's not usually comfortable in these situations.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you want to have the answer to the question of like, what are you interested in? What type of work are you interested in? You want to have your spiel prepared, like, oh, I'm a 1L at whatever school, and I'm kind of interested in doing this, and that's why I came to this event. What type of work do you do? Done. Like, the conversation has started. You can check off one of your people.
Yeah.
This can also be a good time to do some informational interviews, particularly, say, if you want to work in a different location from your school. If you go to that area during spring break, I think it can be a fantastic opportunity just to reach out and try to set some stuff up, so that when it comes time to really start that job hunt in that market, you're not hitting the ground, kind of from scratch. Like, you've at least built some connections with people that maybe you can call up again and say, hey, I really enjoyed meeting you in the spring. I'm back looking for jobs now. Like, can we catch up or whatever?
And I think it says a lot that you got yourself there. You made the effort. I think just sort of doing that and, making it clear to people that you're serious about it, like you paid to send yourself there. You set up, meetings or coffees with people or things like that, or maybe went to an event or something. I think that says a lot.
Yeah, it makes you stand out from that person that they've never seen before.
Yeah, for sure.
When it's later in this process. Anything you can do to get those warm introductions, I think, is going to help you a lot later in that process, particularly if you're going outside of kind of one of these formal processes like OCI. Speaking of, so there actually are some useful non-school options that people should probably be considering if you're not going down that kind of big firm pathway. So things like national public interest job fairs, diversity career fairs, things like that. If you just Google this, you can find a ton of options. Well, not a ton. There are only a few basically across the country, but you need to know what they are. A lot of these have early registration deadlines where you need to submit your materials. But if you are interested in doing public interest work, for example, there are a few fairs that you basically should probably plan to be at. And now is the time to start thinking about that. Is there any possibility your school might help you with travel expenses or with the registration fees or things like that? And if not, how are you going to fund that? You need to really think through this.
Yeah, and I think that's a situation definitely where starting earlier is going to help you. And the thing with all of these is like, if you miss the deadlines, like that's it. There's no leeway with this kind of stuff. And it's the kind of thing where, they're actually giving you a lot. So, you should appreciate that and take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there definitely are people who will be on the ball. So you want to be one of those people.
Yeah, and the thing that about, a lot of these types of fairs are, right, they happen before OCI, and there are a lot of strong candidates who are going to get jobs through OCI also, but they want to, get in early. So it's not like, you're competing against really strong people. So you want to do the best you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically spend an hour Googling the stuff, put it in your calendar, figure out which ones are most relevant to you, that kind of thing, closest, easiest to attend versus have the most employers, that kind of stuff. And just kind of decide okay, I'm committing to doing this.
And I also think this is a situation where you could talk to career services too.
Oh, for sure.
Just in case you aren't sure. I think they'd appreciate that you're looking into it, or you could ask them their opinion, or if they know if people have gotten hired out of things, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of schools have a specific public interest office. So obviously you should be talking with them as well.
For sure.
And also, a lot of these in the spring, a lot of these groups on campus or offices on campus are going to be doing information sessions. And that is also something that you probably should think very seriously about attending. I don't think if you're planning to do OCI, you should skip the orientation to OCI session, for example. Or if you're planning on getting a public interest job, then you should just blow off the public interest career lunchtime lecture. That would be silly.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things for you to take advantage of, and I'm surprised at how many students don't. So
totally.
Make yourself stand out.
Yeah, and a lot of groups on campus, if you're in different clubs and things, they're often willing to look at your resume, cover letter. Sometimes they'll have job hunt type of things. So just take advantage of all of this stuff. Why not?
Oh, and one thing about groups on campus, sometimes you can get sort of a role in the group, an official title, and it doesn't necessarily involve that much, but a lot of times that can help you make connections to employers because that's who they reach out to. And so I think that's a great way to sort of, get involved.
Yeah, or also you can invite people to speak, and people really, even if they don't end up doing it, they're flattered.
Definitely.
So yeah, if you join, it's pretty easy to be the vice president of the Sports Law Association or whatever. Trust me, I was a VP of a lot of things.
Wow.
Because it doesn't require very much effort, but it looks good, and you meet people, and now you're a board member. I don't think you want to be the president because then you have to actually run it, but you get access to a budget. You can throw parties. There's a lot of benefits really to being on the board of these different organizations.
I agree.
Obviously, if you are struggling with your grades or you're really struggling with your career plan, you can get outside help. We can help you. But there are people at your school typically that can help you. So exhaust those resources. Finally, let's talk a little bit about how to use your 1L job over the summer as a way to set yourself up for some 2L options. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you want to do a really good job and be liked at your 1L job and have, references from there, and hopefully have work that you could show people or talk about. Maybe you get a writing sample. So things like that are really important. I would take it really seriously, whatever it is, and make sure that you're learning the most, that you can talk about it. Another thing that I think we've talked about before is If you want to be in a certain market, it's like if it's a different city from where you are, then finding a 1L job there is a really great way to pave the way for a 2L job there. So I think there are things, getting jobs in certain areas that can help you if that's what you want to do as a 2L. But that's really going to be the thing that they're looking at. That's sort of your legal work experience when you're interviewing for the 2L jobs.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I mean, I think this is not a job that you should blow off in any way. You want to go be enthusiastic, do solid work, show up on time, be reliable. And I think also it's a great idea to keep in touch with people that you really connected to. And maybe a way to connect to people is to go for coffee each week with someone different, that kind of thing. Take advantage of all the lunches and stuff that your employer is offering, because oftentimes they'll have like lunch and learn sessions. But also keep in touch after the summer, and you can follow up a month later or whatever, being like, hey, I'm in the middle of my job search, like, can I take you for coffee and kind of get your thoughts on my couple of options, that kind of thing. People generally want to do that if you've made a good impression, and these are people that you want to have on your team.
Definitely. So I think there are people who don't take it that seriously, or even as they're kind of getting their story together and describe what they did 1L summer, I feel like they sort of downplay it. But I think, it's really important to, talk it up, to make good relationships, and to make sure you have something solid that you're going to be able to talk about later.
Right. Another great piece of advice I got once was for every single assignment that you do in a job, however minor it might seem at the time, to put that in a document and describe, who you worked for, what you did, what your role was, that kind of thing. So that later when it comes time to put all the stuff on your resume, you're not scratching your head saying, what was it, that thing I did? And just that it's so much easier to do that in real time than it is to do that a year later.
I think that's great. And then you can kind of like figure out what are the most important, what are the most substantive, what, makes sense to go on your resume. And then I think, and it does help you when you're sort of putting together the story.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, unfortunately with that, we are out of time. For more career help and the opportunity to work with us one-on-one, check out careerdicta.com. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app, because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee or Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com. Or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. So Sadie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And thanks for listening, and we'll talk soon.